Looks like we're live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. So today I'm going to be focusing on how to troubleshoot a bug. Now I've been rerunning my project. I've probably done it about 10 times in the last 4 or 5 days, and I've been hitting different bugs. They're not all the same, and it's just really bugging me. So I want to have all of these documented, and I don't want to ever have to run into these issues ever again. If I do, I hope that I have a documented process for how to fix it really quickly. So I want to document, if anyone were to come after me to come work on this project or any project, they have to learn how to debug the code. That's a skill within itself. And that can go pretty deep. I mean, some people are going to be way beyond where I am with that. I'm still learning. Let me pull up what I have so far. So I'll just show the bugs that I've been getting. So this was on the last deployment that I was doing on a fresh deploy, and it's telling me that my GitHub is not accessible. Either it doesn't exist or the SSH forwarding is set up incorrectly. And when you've done this process like maybe 1,000+ times like I have, it's kind of hard to think that I missed something in the SSH. But I don't know, sometimes you get too overconfident in your process, so you need to kind of go back and reanalyze it and go back to basics sometimes. So this is going to be about my process for how I troubleshoot and debug. First, I think it's most important to ask the right questions, because I don't know, for example, there's been so many times where I'll hit a bug in something and I'll just be banging my head against the desk for like 24 to 48 hours just trying to crush this bug. And then I'll just maybe do a completely fresh server, just redo it all from scratch, and it'll just magically work that time. And I should have just done that from the beginning. Yeah, so you need to learn like when to just redo something really quickly. When your process might have been compromised, that'd be a good time to like probably redo it. I'll go through a little bit of what my process already is as far as how I go about debugging, but I'm still learning. And there's a book I'm reading right now called The Pragmatic Programmer. There's a lot of concepts that I use from that book, and so I was like, let's finally read this book front to back. And I haven't gone to the debugging section in it yet, so I think it'd be cool to actually dig into that for a minute and see what they have to say. I'm not sure how long that section is, but I'm going to pull that up and try and highlight some things out of it. I guess for reference, I'll go through first what my process is, and then I can kind of compare that to what the book says, and we can see how close we are. Yeah, so I just took some notes here. Learning from the single best source of truth you can find. For me, it's currently probably out of the Pragmatic Programmer. There's got to be a lot of really good resources online as well. People have probably taken cheat sheets from that book and added upon it themselves and stuff. So there's a lot of stuff we can find on Google. But first I'm going to tell you how I go about troubleshooting, trying to figure out if it's me that caused the bug, in which case it's not really a bug, in which case it might need to be better documented, so we can learn something through that even if it is our own fault. And if it's not our own fault, then obviously there's a process for getting these bugs resolved. So first of all, it's a good kind of think like a scientist. When you hit a bug, even if you don't need to Google it right then and there, you probably want to just document it somewhere. So like copy and paste a snippet of it somewhere so you can refer back to it. Because I just had to reboot my machine to start this stream. I didn't have to, but I wanted to. And I could have lost this. So luckily I already had it stored away, but I've got it right here. And all the details of the bug are right there. I was running it in verbose mode, so you can see it's kind of verbose. So I've vagranted back up to where I was, and then I hit Google, which is obviously one of the first steps. You want to look for something that's specific to the error, but not specific to you. So for me, this error didn't really seem to tell me a whole lot here that was meaningful, although that could be my mistake. And I just kind of skipped down to here and read this. And it's pretty, this part's pretty specific to mine, so you definitely want to skip over that part, but you'll want to copy something that's specific to the error. So if I just copy this part, then I can see what that brings. Sometimes that might be too broad or vague, so a lot of the time I'll paste it and then add discourse.roots, because that's the forum for the stack that I'm using. So I can see that there's some pretty popular threads on this forum already, and basically I go start digging through all of those to see which ones are relevant to me. I mean, that's all pretty obvious stuff. I think the less obvious part comes to just the code of ethics when you're asking for help from other people, especially when it's something open source like this. You don't want to just go on the Roots forum and start asking stupid questions that you could have solved yourself if you just would have done a little bit of research. That's the number one way for people to not be very willing to help you. And so I think I guess the ethics or behavior of it is more the less obvious part of how you would debug something. So currently my process would be to explore their entire forum for anything that could be related to my error. And yeah, this is like a big learning process, and you get better at Googling exactly which errors you get. I mean, sometimes it'll be more specific, sometimes it'll be less specific. The faster you can find the problems that are as closely related to yours, run through all those steps that they suggest, run through all of their suggested solutions, and you almost want to document your own version of this. Like, take some notes somewhere and document your own process of doing this, because ultimately you want to get to a point where you can reproduce your error. If you've gone through all of the suggested solutions and it's still not working, then you basically want to wipe everything and start from scratch. Then follow those notes that you have been trying to reproduce and make sure that you have an exact steps and procedure of how you got to that bug, and then do it again from scratch. Sometimes if you're still not sure on how to recreate that exact problem, you might have to do that multiple times. And if that doesn't work, only then do you post to the forum. That's, I think, where most people go wrong. because the Roots forum has been notoriously known for being kind of harsh. Some people, I've seen some blog posts, people saying that it has this kind of aura around it. I don't really think it's that way at all. I think people are really willing to help on that if they've seen that you've put a lot of effort into trying to fix it yourself. So I'm going to document that process. Meanwhile, there's always a shortcut, and that's to have someone that you can hire to help get you through problems, someone that's like way smarter than you about these sort of things. I'm going to be working on adding a feature to the website where there will be like a featured team of consultants that you can hire for as little as like, I don't know, 15 minutes or something like that. 15, 30 minutes. Because you can make a lot of headway just talking to someone really smart when you've hit some bugs. So I'm going to be building that feature into it, but for now, I want to document this bug, document the process of documenting a bug and debugging, and then from there I'm going to start working some consultants in that could really help be a shortcut to people that don't want to go through this process. Because when I want to post something to a forum, I have to redo it multiple times, and that will take hours. And yeah, it's usually like a 24-hour process if someone helps you at all. If the bug isn't like relevant to anyone else, or if it's hard to reproduce, like you probably just won't get a reply at all. So that's where it's really nice to be able to hire people. So before I dig into this, I'm really curious what the pragmatic programmer has to say. This is basically the Bible of programming as far as I understand it. It looks like this part is about 20 minutes long.
Topic 20. Debugging. In the play Ajax, Sophocles wrote, "It is a painful thing to look at your own trouble and know that you yourself and no one else has made it." The word bug has been used to describe an object of terror ever since the 14th century. Rear Admiral Dr. Grace Hopper, the inventor of COBOL, is credited with observing the first computer bug, literally, a moth caught in a relay in an early computer system. When asked to explain why the machine wasn't behaving as intended, a technician reported that there was a bug in the system, and dutifully taped it, wings and all, into the logbook. Regrettably, we still have bugs in the system, albeit not the flying kind. But the 14th century meaning, a bogeyman, is perhaps even more applicable now than it was then. Software defects manifest themselves in a variety of ways, from misunderstood requirements to coding errors. Unfortunately, modern computer systems are still limited to doing what you tell them to do, not necessarily what you want them to do. No one writes perfect software, so it's a given that debugging will take up a major portion of your day. Let's look at some of the issues involved in debugging and some general strategies for finding elusive bugs. Psychology of debugging. Debugging is a sensitive, emotional subject for many developers. Instead of attacking it as a puzzle to be solved, you may encounter denial, finger-pointing, lame excuses, or just plain apathy. Embrace the fact that debugging is just problem-solving, and attack it as such. Having found someone else's bug, you can spend time and energy laying blame on the filthy culprit who created it. In some workplaces, this is part of the culture and may be cathartic. However, in the technical arena, You want to follow the advice in Tip 29. Fix the problem, not the blame. It doesn't really matter whether the bug is your fault or someone else's. It's still your problem. A debugging mindset. Before you start debugging, it's important to adopt the right mindset. You need to turn off many of the defenses you use each day to protect your ego. Tune out any project pressures you may be under and get yourself comfortable. Above all, remember the first rule of debugging. Tip 30. Don't panic. It's easy to get into a panic, especially if you are facing a deadline or have a nervous boss or client breathing down your neck while you are trying to find the cause of the bug. But it is very important to step back a pace and actually think about what could be causing the symptoms that you believe indicate a bug. If your first reaction on witnessing a bug or seeing a bug report is, "That's impossible," you are plainly wrong. Don't waste a single neuron on the train of thought that begins, "But that can't happen," because clearly it can, and has. Beware of myopia when debugging. Resist the urge to fix just the symptoms you see. It is more likely that the actual fault may be several steps removed from what you are observing, and may involve a number of other related things. Always try to discover the root cause of a problem, not just this particular appearance of it. Where to start? Before you start to look at the bug, make sure that you are working on code that built cleanly, without warnings. We routinely set compiler warning levels as high as possible. It doesn't make sense to waste time trying to find a problem that the computer could find for you. We need to concentrate on the harder problems at hand. When trying to solve any problem, you need to gather all the relevant data. Unfortunately, bug reporting isn't an exact science. It's easy to be misled by coincidences, and you can't afford to waste time debugging coincidences. You first need to be accurate in your observations. Accuracy in bug reports is further diminished when they come through a third party. You may actually need to watch the user who reported the bug in action to get a sufficient level of detail. Andy has a story about that.
I once worked on a large graphics application. Nearing release, the testers reported that the application crashed every time they painted a stroke with this particular brush. The programmer responsible argued that there was nothing wrong with it. He had tried painting with it and it worked just fine. This dialogue went back and forth for several days, with tempers rapidly rising. Finally, we got them together in the same room. The testers selected the brush tool and painted a stroke from the upper right corner down to the lower left corner. The application exploded. "Oh," said the programmer in a small voice, who then sheepishly admitted that he had made test strokes only from the lower left to the upper right, which did not expose the bug.
There are 2 points to this story. You may need to interview the user who reported the bug in order to gather more data than you were initially given. Artificial tests, such as the programmer's single brush stroke from bottom to top, don't exercise enough of an application. You must brutally test both boundary conditions and realistic end-user usage patterns. You need to do this systematically. Debugging strategies. Once you think you know what's going on, it's time to find out what the program thinks is going on. Reproducing bugs. No, our bugs aren't really multiplying, although some of them are probably old enough to do it legally. We're talking about a different kind of reproduction. The best way to start fixing a bug is to make it reproducible. After all, if you can't reproduce it, how will you know if it's ever fixed? But we want more than a bug that can be reproduced by following some long series of steps. We want a bug that can be reproduced with a single command. It's a lot harder to fix a bug if you have to go through 15 steps to get to the point where the bug shows up. So here's the most important rule of debugging. Tip 31. Failing test before fixing code. Sometimes by forcing yourself to isolate the circumstances that display the bug, you'll even gain an insight on how to fix it. The act of writing the test informs the solution. Coder in a strange land. All this talk about isolating the bug is fine, But when faced with 50,000 lines of code and a ticking clock, what's a poor coder to do? First, look at the problem. Is it a crash? It's always surprising when we teach courses that involve programming how many developers see an exception pop up in red and immediately tab across to the code. Tip 32. Read the damn error message. Enough said. Bad results. What if it's not a crash? What if it's just a bad result? Get in there with a debugger and use your failing test to trigger the problem. Before anything else, make sure that you're also seeing the incorrect value in the debugger. We've both wasted hours trying to track down a bug only to discover that this particular run of the code worked fine. Sometimes the problem is obvious. Interest rate is 4.5 and should be 0.045. More often, you have to look deeper to find out why the value is wrong in the first place. Make sure you know how to move up and down the call stack and examine the local stack environment. We find it often helps to keep pen and paper nearby so we can jot down notes. Trying to track down a bug only to discover that this particular run of the code worked fine. Sometimes the problem is obvious. Interest rate is 4.5 and should be 0.045. More often, you have to look deeper to find out why the value is wrong in the first place. Make sure you know how to move up and down the call stack and examine the local stack environment.
I am not exactly sure what that means, but I think it means that you just know how to debug each level of the stack, which I don't. No, I actually suck at just about every level of it. So that's why it's important to have consultants, but I do know how to figure out where the issues are coming from most of the time. I should definitely get better at using something called PHP Storm, which is like a PHP debugger, but I'm not that great with PHP, so I have a lot to learn in that department. But I don't think this particular bug is coming from PHP. I believe it's coming from some sort of SSH or a record issue within Ansible. Anyways, carry on.
We find it often helps to keep pen and paper nearby so we can jot down notes. In particular, we often come across a clue and chase it down only to find it didn't pan out. If we didn't jot down where we were when we started the chase, we could lose a lot of time getting back there. Sometimes you're looking at a stack trace that seems to scroll on forever. In this case, there's often a quicker way to find the problem than examining each and every stack frame. Use a binary chop. But before we discuss that, let's look at two other common bug scenarios.
Binary chop?
Sensitivity to input values. You've been there. Your program works fine with all the test data and survives its first week in production with honor. Then it suddenly crashes when fed a particular data set. You can try looking at the place it crashes and work backwards, but sometimes it's easier to start with the data. Get a copy of the data set and feed it through a locally running copy of the app, making sure it still crashes. Then binary chop the data until you isolate exactly which input values are leading to the crash. Regressions across releases. You're on a good team, and you release...
Okay, I should look up what that means. Look it up. If I had to guess, binary chop would be like, I don't think I'll be entirely correct here, but let's say you were running a series of different commands, and basically you would just chop it down. So you'd run this one, then you'd run this one, then you'd run this one. And you'd run them all in like verbose mode, so you'd get the biggest error outputs. That's my guess. I'm probably like so off from that. That's way over my head when it comes to computer science. There's not really much results for it. Anyways, let's pretend we know what it means and move along.
Release your software into production. At some point, a bug pops up in code that worked okay a week ago. Wouldn't it be nice if you could identify the specific change that introduced it? Guess what? Binary chop time. Every CS undergraduate has been forced to code a binary chop, sometimes called a binary search. The idea is simple. You're looking for a particular value in a sorted array. You could just look at each value in turn, but you'd end up looking at roughly half the entries on average until you either found the value you wanted, or you found a value greater than it, which would mean the value's not in the array. But it's faster to use a divide and conquer approach. Choose a value in the middle of the array. If it's the one you're looking for, stop. Otherwise, you can chop the array in two. If the value you find is greater than the target, then you know it must...
Yeah, I think I was kind of right on that, actually. Faster to use divide and conquer approach. Start in middle. If it works, continue with your day. I don't know. If it doesn't, keep chopping. So an example of when I actually do use that a lot would be when I'm styling the front end of the theme. So if I come into theme, resources, assets, styles, here's all my style sheets. So this pulls in all my variables. This is all the leaf stuff, which is specific to Bonsai. This is some auto load bootstrap stuff. This pulls in the fonts, and this pulls in all my default roots components. I don't really touch those actually. If I find a problem, I'm more likely to be working within Leaf, which is my own custom style sheet. So I'd come into main, you see all these different partials and components. So if I hit a bug in there, then I'm most likely to just, so I don't have to stop working at the moment. I might just like cut the first half of it off, see if it works. If it works, then I'll keep working on what I'm working on, and then I'll go back to it later. Yeah, so I guess what the binary chop would be is just commenting all of this out, starting with the first one, seeing if that works. If not, then you have to do this. So I can see how there would be a time advantage to doing the binary chop. That's interesting.
Be in the first half of the array. Otherwise, it's in the second half. Repeat the procedure in the appropriate subarray, and in no time you'll have a result. As we'll see when we talk about big O notation later, a linear search is ON, and a binary chop is O log N. So, the binary chop is way faster on any decent-sized problem. Let's see how to apply it to debugging. When you're facing a massive stack trace and you're trying to find out exactly which function mangled the value in error, you do a chop by choosing a stack frame somewhere in the middle and seeing if the error is manifest there. If it is, then you know to focus on the frames before. Otherwise, the problem is in the frames after. Chop again. Even if you have 64 frames in the stack trace, this approach will give you an answer after at most 6 attempts. If you find bugs that appear on certain datasets, you might be able to do the same thing. Split the dataset into 2 and see if the problem occurs if you feed one or the other through the app. Keep dividing the data until you get a minimum set of values that exhibit the problem. If your team has introduced a bug during a set of releases, you can use the same type of technique. Create a test that causes the current release to fail. Then choose a halfway release between now and the last known working version. Run the test again and decide how to narrow your search. Being able to do this is just one of the many benefits of having good version control in your projects. Indeed, many version control systems will take this further and will automate the process, picking releases for you depending on the result of the test. Logging and/or tracing. Debuggers generally focus on the state of the program now. Sometimes you need more. You need to watch the state of a program or a data structure over time. Seeing a stack trace can only tell you how you got here directly. It typically can't tell you what you were doing prior to this call chain, especially in event-based systems. Tracing statements are those little diagnostic messages you print to the screen or to a file that say things such as got here and value of x equals 2. It's a primitive technique compared with the IDE-style debuggers, but it is peculiarly effective at diagnosing several classes of errors that debuggers can't. Tracing is invaluable in any system where time itself is a factor: concurrent processes, real-time systems, and event-based applications. You can use tracing statements to drill down into the code. That is, you can add tracing statements as you descend.
Okay, let's see what a tracing statement is. Not in relation to COVID-19. I want to see an example of some. If I had to guess, it's basically a log. So all this output, that's like logging every step of the way. When Ansible's doing its thing. Yeah, I'm not gonna, just gonna assume that I kind of have an idea of what that is. Continue.
The call tree. Trace messages should be in a regular, consistent format, as you may want to parse them automatically. For instance, if you needed to track down a resource leak, such as unbalanced file opens and closes, you could trace each open and each close in a log file. By processing the log file with text processing tools or shell commands, you can easily identify where the offending open was occurring.
All right, I think I'm correct.
Rubber ducking.
Rubber
A very
ducking.
simple but particularly useful technique for finding the cause of a problem is simply to explain it to someone else. The other person should look over your shoulder at the screen and nod his or her head constantly, like a rubber duck bobbing up and down in a bathtub. They do not need to say a word. The simple act of explaining, step by step, what the code is supposed to do often causes the problem to leap off the screen and announce itself. Why rubber ducking? Let's ask Dave.
Way back when I was an undergraduate at Imperial College in London, I did a lot of work with a graduate student called Greg Pugh, who was one of the best developers I've ever met. He used to carry around a little yellow rubber duck in his pocket. Whenever he sat down in front of a terminal to code, he'd take the duck out and put it on top of the terminal, looking at him. It took me a couple of months before I had the courage to ask.
It sounds simple, but in explaining the problem to another person, you must explicitly state things that you may take for granted when going through the code yourself. By having to verbalize some of these assumptions, you may suddenly gain new insight into the problem. And if you don't have a person, a rubber duck, or teddy bear, a potted plant will do. Process of elimination. In most projects, the code you are debugging may be a mixture of application code written by you and others on your project team, third-party products, database connectivity, web framework, specialized communications or algorithms, and so on, and the platform environment, operating systems, system libraries, and compilers. It is possible that a bug exists in the OS, the compiler, or third-party product, but this should not be your first thought. It is much more likely that the bug exists in the application code under development. It is generally more profitable to assume that the application code is incorrectly calling into a library than to assume that the library itself is broken. Even if the problem does lie with the third party, you'll still have to eliminate your code before submitting the bug report. Dave has a story here.
A while back, Andy and I worked on a project where a senior engineer was convinced that the select system call was broken on a particular Unix system. No amount of persuasion or logic could change his mind, and the fact that every other networking application on the box worked fine was apparently irrelevant. He spent weeks writing workarounds which, for some odd reason, didn't seem to fix the problem. When finally forced to sit down and read the documentation on Select, he discovered the problem and corrected it in a matter of minutes. We now use the phrase, "Select is broken," as a gentle reminder whenever one of us starts blaming the system for a fault that's likely to be one of our own. And that's why we say,
Tip 33. Select isn't broken. Remember, if you see hoof prints, think horses, not zebras. The OS is probably not broken, and Select is probably just fine. If you changed only one thing and the system stopped working, that one thing was likely to be responsible, directly or indirectly, no matter how far-fetched it seems. Sometimes the thing that changed is outside of your control. New versions of the OS, compiler, database, or other third-party software can wreak havoc with previously correct code. New bugs might show up. Bugs for which you had a workaround get fixed, breaking the workaround. APIs change, functionality changes. In short, it's a whole new ballgame, and you must retest the system under these new conditions. So keep a close eye on the schedule when considering an upgrade. You may want to wait until after the next release. The element of surprise. When you find yourself surprised by a bug, perhaps even muttering, "That's impossible," under your breath where we can't hear you, you must reevaluate truths you hold dear. In that discount calculation algorithm, the one you knew was bulletproof and couldn't possibly be the cause of this bug, did you test all the boundary conditions? That other piece of code you've been using for years, it couldn't possibly still have a bug in it, could it? Of course it can. The amount of surprise you feel when something goes wrong is proportional to the amount of trust and faith you have in the code being run. That's why, when
Sometimes it's just heartbreaking.
faced with a surprising failure, you must accept that one or more of your assumptions is wrong. Don't gloss over a routine or piece of code involved in the bug because you know it works. Prove it. Prove it in this context, with this data, with these boundary conditions. Tip 34. Don't assume it. Prove it. When you come across a surprise bug, beyond merely fixing it, you need to determine why this failure wasn't caught earlier. Consider whether you need to amend the unit or other tests so that they would have caught it. Also, if the bug is the result of bad data that was propagated through a couple of levels before causing the explosion, see if better parameter checking in those routines would have isolated it earlier. While you're at it, are there any other places in the code that may be susceptible to this same bug? Now is the time to find and fix them. Make sure that whatever happened you'll know if it happens again. If it took a long time to fix this bug, ask yourself why. Is there anything you can do to make fixing this bug easier the next time around? Perhaps you could build in better testing hooks, or write a log file analyzer. Finally, if the bug is the result of someone's wrong assumption, discuss the problem with the whole team. If one person misunderstands, then it's possible many people do. Do all this, and hopefully, you won't be surprised next time. Debugging Checklist. Is the problem being reported a direct result of the underlying bug, or merely a symptom? Is the bug really in the framework you're using? Is it in the... Finally, if the bug is the result of someone's wrong assumption, discuss the problem with the whole team. If one person misunderstands, then it's possible many people do. Do all this, and hopefully, you won't be surprised next time. Debugging Checklist. Is the problem being reported a direct result of the underlying bug, or... or merely a symptom? Is the bug really in the framework you're using? Is it in the OS? Or is it in your code? If you explained this problem in detail to a coworker, what would you say? If the suspect code passes its unit tests, are the tests complete enough? What happens if you run the tests with this data? Do the conditions that cause this bug exist anywhere else in the system? Are there other bugs still in the larval stage, just waiting to hatch? Here's a challenge. Just kidding. Debugging is challenge enough. Topic 21.
It's pretty
Text
good little,
manipulation.
it's a pretty good little checklist. Nice. Well, that was a great chapter. I would say that I learned a lot. I have some things to research. But for the most part, I would say that I already follow that outline. Definitely room for improvement, but I think we're close to the mark. Okay, so now let's take this process and let's apply it to the bug that I'm experiencing. So, what have I tried? That's kind of where I like to start. Well, I usually start at the top of Google. It's usually better than the search function on Roots forum. I'm not certain this issue is even specific to Roots, but there's enough documentation on this forum now that it can pretty much be used for anything on a project Roots related. At least it's the best place to start, in my opinion. So no errors when I run the provision of the server, but when I deploy, he gets his repository cannot be accessed. Please verify the repository exists. You have SSH forwarding set up correctly. I get the exact same error. Failed connection to a remote app. Now this is during, okay. So, nothing about this first part though. That's the one thing that makes me think I haven't really looked into this first part of the error yet. The output has been hidden due to the fact that no log true was specified for the result. No log true. And where is that located? Let's see if we can recreate anything like this from a different thread. Doesn't have to be 2.9, but okay, this could also be added. And nothing specific for roots, so let's try discourse.roots. Deploy issue. Is this one that we've already pulled up? Can't deploy. No. This one might be new. Clone project files. Alright, this is definitely a different issue. Ignoring, okay. That's similar right there, but that's during clone project files. I'm getting it during, okay, it is clone project files. Establish SSH connection for user, web. Due to no log. Okay. Solved when I realized I forgot to add the repo address here. Yeah, it's so weird. I used the staging branch without having it on Bitbucket. There was a bug related to this, but it was my mistake with config. Git clone is successful. Yeah, I didn't even get clone in this project though. Although it's so weird, like alright, so which environment was I running this on? This was on I think that was my production environment, although I believe I was getting the same error on both environments. Pretty sure. Yeah, this was my production, I believe. So the weird thing is if I come into my environment configuration, come into production, WordPress sites, it's behaving almost exactly like I have a typo in here. I don't usually capitalize my repositories, so that could potentially be it. I've run into tons of bugs in the past where I added a capital N thinking it was okay, and then after hours of trying to solve it, I realized that it didn't want a symbol or a capital right there. So that could potentially be it. I could basically duplicate it, delete the Git file, recommit it with all lowercase and see if that fixes it. That would be the shortest way of testing my hypothesis without completely rebooting from scratch, which is like a 45-minute, maybe an hour and a half long process, depending on how fast I'm going. So I think that might be the best result for now. It's just so weird. Let's see if we can find anything on that. Capital letters in Git repository URL. Repo names are not case sensitive. Because I did the configuration in all lowercase at first, and then I realized that it didn't match the actual. Okay, so let's pull it up on GitHub. Yeah, it's capital in the address bar. I'm having problems talking tonight. Okay, well, I can see people are talking about it not being ideal. So let's take some notes. Actually, I'm not going to delete it. Different name. So first, let's go to my GitHub. See what repositories I've been creating. Okay. Now I had this one in the future. This is where I created dark mode in actually, so I didn't want to delete it at first, but now I've tested dark mode enough times to know it's working fine and it's not terribly complex, so it's not like I'd be losing anything that's irreplaceable. Just gonna come down to delete this repository. It looks like I capitalized it on this one as well, which I was able to get on the staging site, so I don't think that could be the issue. But either way, I still have a feeling like somehow the GitHub, this one is disconnected from the code that I'm editing or something. So I'll just follow through with this hypothesis. Yeah, let's delete it. Take a minute to duplicate. It's a pretty big file, I believe, folder. Some dude I follow on Instagram just posted this. One of his pieces of art made staff pick of the week on Vimeo. So I just want to check it out real quick. Let's see, put this in the headphones. That should be okay. I wonder if this is done in mega scans. That's so dope. I forget if he does this in Cinema 4D or Unreal Engine. Wow. Houdini. Yeah. Wow. Nuke for 2D. Ableton Live. Native Instruments. Photography. Panasonic GH5. Huh. This is incredible. Yeah, that's some Houdini stuff right there. Oh my god. That's beautiful. Annihilation vibes for sure. Dope. I'm glad people like that exist. Alright, so now we have a copy of this. I'm gonna just name it The Future. We're gonna come in here, and if I show the hidden files with a Shift Command period, this should show .git, and we will just right click, move to trash, get attributes, move to trash. Okay, so now we should have this fresh one right here. And we don't need to get rid of this one yet, but we can just take this guy over here, and we will drag and drop the new one into GitHub. Weird, that didn't work. So let's try removing this and doing it. Okay, create a repository, the future, that's all good. Now we're gonna publish it. We'll just call it the future, private, no organization for now. All right, so now let's close out of this old one and add them so we don't get confused. And then let's come in here and we'll do Shift Command A, open it up and add them. Then in iTerm, I'm gonna clean all this up. So let's just do a vagrant halt first. If it even knows where it is anymore. It's probably not good to just change the whole project name while it's running. And now we can just close out of here. Alright, so come into GitHub, Command Shift A. Oh, I already did this. Here it is. We'll probably think it's one of my old projects, so I'll just close all these out. Let me just look over the configuration, make sure it's all good still. If I come into users, I've got my This was the other place that I thought could have potentially gone wrong. Like if I would have had a typo in there, I think I would have had that same error basically. But I definitely do not have a typo in there, unfortunately. So then we have staging. I'm gonna change it a little bit on this one. No, if that's what we have set up, I'll leave it. Let me come back into DigitalOcean. Let's see what we've got. Okay. Bonsai staging, bonsai production. Just gonna copy these in case I need them. Go staging production. And if we come into networking, we have our domain. It's under Jackalope. I'm doing this as a subdomain. So then I have the future-staging goes to the first one. Whoa. No, that is not correct. What? 140 and 6. Those are not the IPs that I have right here. Did I create them in a different project? Oh, okay. So I did put some in there, and I put some in the future. I might have gotten confused on which servers I'm using. It's possible. If I have two sets of them. Okay, so they're not under here. I do have some under the future right here. And then I believe I did see some in here as well. No, okay, they're not in here. So it's only these ones right here. Future-production, future-staging. I had a typo when I created the staging one. So that could be another issue, something I could look over. I'm gonna recreate these anyways, so let's come into sudo vim ssh config. What? Oh, I went to the wrong directory. That would be like... Okay. So we have future production, no E. Then we have future staging with me. 140 and 6. Okay, those are the correct IP addresses. So staging production. That's what threw me off. I copied the wrong ones. Okay. And now, so I don't believe that's the issue. Future-staging. Let's look at my networking. The future-staging is to 140, which is the correct one. Future-staging, and then the future.jackalope is to 6. Just saying the last set of digits on that. So, that appears to be correctly set up. Alright, so we're going to come back into GitHub. We're going to see if this repository is published yet. Here it is, initial commit 7 minutes ago. So we're going to take this part of the URL. We're going to come into here and replace it. Come into production, do the same thing. Now I should be able to see that in the diff. There's no typos in Mason and thesis or anything. There's really no typo, it's only the uppercase. But let's try this again and see how we do. Feature staging. One thing I do want to check one last time. I'm gonna open up my Bonsai project, the working version, and I want to look at my hosting configuration just in case I could have done anything wrong there. So staging, I have the A record, Bonsai-staging production is Bonsai. Okay, just checking. So now I have that set up. Once again, make sure that my user's configuration is set up correctly. Mason and thesis, that is it. There is no get URL in here. Okay, host is good. Come into our scripts. Look at staging. All right. Okay, there is a difference in these two. I do have forward agent set up on the feature production and not on, oh, I do have it on both, okay. Future staging, 140 and 6. Yep. Okay, so there's nothing here. Let's just come on right in here. Vagrant this bad boy up. I'm gonna take a little break while this does this for a minute. So our old projects be duplicated under a different name. And it should be working again. Let's check it out. Okay, it's working. So let's go into our scripts directory. And then from here, we're going to be running staging.sh. We'll come over to staging before we run it. And just verify this is what we want to run. We can customize it if we need to. It should be on the same server still, so we don't need to re-provision anything. Okay, this is for the staging environment. The future-staging.jackklobe. Okay, so that all looks good. Let's run it. See if we run into the same issue. Oh, wait. Yeah, we did change the GitHub URL. That was found right in here. Future.git. And we ran into the same issue. So our next test would be to recreate the issue as fast as possible, as simply as possible. This could take some time. So we're going to be restarting a new project from scratch right here and documenting the process. So let me pull up my notes. And just for good measure, let's try this again with production. Have I been able to provision the production server? Yeah, so the production server is provisioned. But since we've changed a couple things in the configuration, let's let that run one more time. We'll let everything run one more time. Oops, this is going to be production. So, yep. Gonna run all of it. And I'm going to assume this is not going to work so that we don't have any downtime. I'm going to come in here and recreate the servers that we want. So we're doing this on production. I'm just going to destroy the staging for now. I'm going to recreate it. Okay, make sure you get Ubuntu 18.04. You know what, for this, I'll do the feature, just so that everything's uniform. I'm gonna do 2 droplets. One will be production, Bonsai, future, no backups for now. Okay. Where did I put these? Weird. What? I've never seen like a bug like that before on DigitalOcean. It's not in my main projects. It's not under the future. It's not under Bonsai. That's so weird. Whoa. Why does this not have domains right here? It's so weird. Look at how this has a list of domains associated. This does not. This does. That's another weird bug inconsistency right here. I have to be trying this new feature out on DigitalOcean soon. $12 a month for an app setup. Very interesting. If we do an iOS app, I'll probably want to look into that. Have everything all under one roof. Okay, that is so weird. So let's try and recreate those again. Let's see how this is doing. Okay, 1804. This might be something new as well. That's something to look into for sure. Because I don't remember that. Wait, was that under Bonsai? No, that's just a tag. Okay, it worked that time. It's so weird. Alright, we got the same issue there. So that's why we're just recreating this project. Gonna probably recreate the Futures website 100 times. At least 10 different times. I'm probably on my second. I think that was my second build right there. So we're destroying the second, going to the third. You can just delete this. We can delete this. Shut it all down. Vagrant, destroy. Sure you want to destroy? Yes. Now I'm going to open up Notion so I can start following the same process that I have been following. Here we have staging, here we have production. Come into networking. Jackalope IO is associated with Mason.Lawler. I don't think that would have any issues with it because it doesn't say jackalope.io is here. So I don't think it needs to say that it's here. I'm just going to delete all of these A records. So I'll do the future. Staging. The future. This is production. And now we can add the WWs if we want. Staging. And production. Those match up with the correct IP addresses. So that should be good to go. Now I'm just going to come in here to courses. And I'm going to start opening up each course, each lesson in the quick start speed run. quick setup. Quick setup. What? Configuration, then create local environment, and then deploy staging site. Okay. We're starting up here. Oops. Okay, quick setup. First, we gotta download Bonsai. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that I updated Bonsai yesterday for the first time in like 4 months. So, something we're doing could potentially be from in here as well. In fact, let's look at the diff. So we changed the development script. That should have no effect. Change some SCSS files. Stack.blade. We kind of tidied some things up in the blade file right there. Dark mode PHP. Tools dark SVG. So we added some SVGs. Then we have these SVGs that we removed. So I think that's all there was. I don't think that could be it. Alright, we're gonna come in here and download the zip. Have to look into what this security vulnerability is. Let's call this the future. Do I have anything in here yet? Nope. We'll just drop it into sites. And here we go. While I'm here, I'll just remove this from GitHub. Drop it back into GitHub. Create the repository. Now I want to come into Mason and thesis, future, and I've got to delete this one first. Alright, now we can start a fresh one there. Alright, now let's stick to the script a little better. So I downloaded it. I've already installed all the requirements. That's covered in this video right here. And set up servers. That's a given. Just unchecking all these so I can recheck them. Okay. So the requirements are done. Setting up the servers. This is just a pre-check if you've already done a similar project before, like I am here. This is a perfect use case. You want to remove the VirtualBox, so you could open up VirtualBox if you want. And here you'll see I don't have the future VirtualBox. I already removed it, so I ran Vagrant Destroy for that, which is another way of doing that. Now you need to clear your known host file, so I'm just going to run sudo vim ssh known hosts. Okay, so both of these can go. And now we need to clear the etc. host file. Okay, I don't have anything here for it, so that should be good to go. Create droplets, staging and production, so I already did that. Etc. host, add IP and a record to etc. host, run sudo vim etc. host. So you can just copy these codes if you don't want to type them. And I'm just going to clear all this out. Okay. Wait. What did I just run? I'm going to bring this over here. Sudo vim etc. hosts. So I need some water. I don't know if this step is actually necessary. I believe it helps us SSH into our server initially, but I'm not certain that it's necessary. Because I've been removing it lately sometimes, and I just have never fully understood what this step does. So I'm going to skip it for now. We're going to come down to SSH configuration. We're going to copy the IP addresses. I already did that. And then add project to SSH config. Run sudo vim SSH config. So you can copy this. And you'll see I already have these 2 lines for the future. I don't usually have to add SSH or the forward agent, so I'll remove that line for now. So I have staging and production. Now, I think my cat is violently trying to break the door down. The future staging, the future dash production. That's what I did, right? Future staging, future production. Okay. So then the staging IP address was the first one I copied, and the production was the second one that I copied, right? Yep. So I can right quit out of here. Just make sure there's no typos. Okay, now let's test the SSH. So we'll do SSH root at We'll try the host name at first. Okay, the host name has worked for staging. Does it work for production? You would think so, considering they've been added as twins. Okay, now let's try it with the associated A record. Yes, working. So I've established SSH connection. Sorry. Which is a really good thing to do up front, just to make sure that that's all working from the get-go. Now, set up the A records. I have already done that. And those are just some extra resources. So we should be good on this part for now. I'm gonna move this elsewhere. Now we'll come into configuring Bonsai. Just gonna clear this to clean it up a little bit. I'm gonna clean up my desktop too. Okay. We're gonna create the GitHub repository, which we've already done. Let me just go to it on GitHub to establish that. Okay, and it should say last commit was done like 9 minutes ago. So that's established. Let's go into Trellis group vars. I know that this is the new project that we started working on, but just to be sure, I'm gonna fully close out of Atom and then reopen it from GitHub. Okay, this should be a fresh project. We'll come into group vars. All users you're going to add your GitHub user, which should have your SSH keys at this URL. You can find how to do that on Google if you've never done that before. You can just add them in settings. So now we have development, WordPress sites. It's going to be the future.jackalope.io. The future. Vault. Make sure that you have this changed. Even if we just leave the passwords default for now. You'd never want to do that in production. Okay, development's good. Now we'll go to staging. The future-staging.jackalope.io. The future.get. True. Make sure you get the site name right here in the vault. Default passwords for now, just for testing purposes. Bonsai, okay, get the site name first, then the future.jackalope. the future.jackalope, the future, true on the SSL. Just double checking spelling, then make sure you get the site name over here. Okay, now we're gonna dummy check it all. Users, Mason and Thesis, yep. Development, WordPress. Font, future, yep. Staging. Why does this say that it's not changed? Oh, I didn't save it. There we go. That's why we dummy check. Okay. True. Okay, everything's looking good to me. So now we come into site, WP-CLI, and we make sure this matches up. So this is the future.test. The future.jacklog.io is the site name. And this will be future-staging.jackalope.io. Future.jackalope.io is the site name. This is the A record of production, the future.jackalope.io, followed by the site name. That's all looking good. Now we can come up into scripts and configure that. We have development is the first one we want to look at. So we do composer, update, then we're going to vagrant up. I need to make this default uncommented. All of this is default. I can keep all this default since we're just testing right now. I don't really know anything I need to change at the moment. I'm going to come and grab that key from an existing project. But other than that, everything looks good in development. Now let's look at staging. We don't need to clean the database before it exists. Then lately I have been actually adding this up here. This will be changed to the future-staging. That's for the A record. Staging, and then this is the future.jackalope. Once again, let's drop that key in there. Oops. And we'll be going from development to staging to sync the databases after. Under production, it's basically the same process, but I'm going to take this, drop it up here, and Bonsai production turns into the future, and this turns into the future, and this gets changed, and if everything goes well, then we'll go from staging to production. So that's all looking good. We can do the rest of these scripts later. These are the only ones used in the speedrun. Alright, so let's check back to our documentation, see where we're at. We've configured group R's, hosts, okay. For hosts, we come into hosts under trellis, and then we have staging, which is the future dash staging. And then under production, we have the future, close out of those. Configure security, CMS class for security. Okay, we're skipping security for now. Configure site WP CLI. Did we do that already? Yep. So now we have site scripts. We've done all of those. Except we need the sync script. So this is a paid one. You can buy it here for $10 from the creator of Roots. I'm just going to come into one of my other projects and copy paste it. What am I doing? Okay, scripts. Wrong one. There we go. Okay, Bonsai changes to the future most of the time. Okay, future.test, then we have the future.jacklope, 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 future-staging at the future.jacklope, future-staging.jacklope. Okay, that looks good to me. Okay, sync is now in there. Then for dark mode, we can do that later. I just want to get things working right now. Okay, so we come into development script. We're done configuring Bonsai, by the way. We should be. So now we're on to create local environment. First we have to set our permissions for our scripts to run. So you're going to come into your scripts directory, which I happen to already have saved under the features shortcuts right here. So we come into scripts, and then from here you want to run chmod r777. Now we have permission to run the scripts. We're going to run development.sh. And if this works, it should run for quite a while, so I'm going to take a break. Okay, we're just about done with this. Looks like everything's going according to plan. So when this process is done, I should be able to come into, let's see. I should be able to come into the future.test, and it should work. All right. Let's try that out. Okay. There we go. I don't know why dark mode is enabled. That's not right. I'm just curious about this. It doesn't really matter, but interesting. It's importing that even though it's commented out. I don't know if that's like in the cache. Okay, cool. It was a caching issue. That was really confusing to me. Just did a hard refresh and I fixed it. So now what we want is to move on in the process. So let's pull up our Notion documentation. We successfully deployed. We can close out of this one. Now we have commit and publish to GitHub. I'm just going to do the speed run configuration, which is like the bare minimum. I'm going to push that. Now I'm going to check the DNS propagation. I've got that link down here. You can just change this URL to your liking, which would be thefuture.jackalope.io. That one's good. And then we have the future-staging.jackalope.io. and that one's all good as well. Well, not all good, there was one X, but that means it's good to go. So come back into our documentation. Our next thing is to make sure we have our permissions set in our scripts, but we're gonna run staging. So we'll come into the scripts, staging.sh, and before I like to run it, I'll just pull it up wherever it is. Where did I hide that at? There we go. We'll put it in its own little thing over here. So come into scripts, staging, add our keys, accessible galaxy, keygen, feature staging, run the provision. Once again, we're gonna run the keygen for good measure, then staging feature.jackalope, scripts, okay, development to staging sync when it's all done. That's all looking good. So let's run it. Hopefully, if this works, then it should be running for a minute, so I'll take another break. Just stand by for questions it might ask along the way. All right. So I have successfully recreated my bug. I know that this repository is working. I'll come in here and double check it. Here we go. Then I can pull up my GitHub keys and I can look at them and verify that it's the same keys that I've connected to my computer. So this is the amount of work that I like to go through to reproduce the error. And yeah, there's something new, there's something broken that the system wasn't even doing back on, I think it was like Monday maybe, or last weekend. So before I jump into any accusations, the OS is probably not broken. Let's go through the checklist. Is the problem being reported an issue with the underlying bug or merely a symptom? I believe that this might be a symptom of something getting messed up with my SSH keys. Is the bug really in the framework you're using? Is it in the OS? Is it in your code? I believe it could be in the OS, which is where the SSH is handled, open SSH. So, yeah, I'm not sure. If you explain the problem in detail to a coworker, what would you say? I would say that everything works fine. I should probably turn my camera around. Everything works fine as I'm running through the speed run from the quick setup of the servers to the configuration of everything to getting the local environment launched, then getting the staging provisioned and deployed is where I hit the error. So I believe the error first strikes in the I think it successfully provisions actually. Yep, so this would be where it provisioned, and then it starts to deploy, and when it's cloning the project files it hits some type of error which spits out an error log saying that my GitHub repository cannot be accessed. Please verify the repository exists and you have SSH forwarding set up correctly. More info, it lists these two links. And that's where I'm at. I've gone through all the forums on it, tried everything. So we covered that in the beginning of this video. Now we've come full circle. And this is the amount of work I go through before I actually post about it on the forum. There's a lot of reasons for that. One is to avoid a lot of people trying to solve a problem. Their time is really valuable, and if it's something that's your fault or you can't recreate it, then they're wasting their time. So you have to recreate the problem first. It has to be recreatable. So I have an exact process that I've followed. I've found the bug, tried out everything I could. When I couldn't, I redid everything just to make sure that I didn't miss anything along the way. And now I have the entire process documented. And I've recreated the bug. Now I can take these error logs that are right here, post them on the forum, and I usually do this at the end of the night so that when I wake up the next morning I might have some help, if we're lucky. If not, then I will just have to keep hacking away and trying out maybe some different forums. Maybe some GitHub forums, some Stack Overflow, stuff like that. Possibly Reddit. Anyways, I'll just lay out all those steps in the post. I'm not going to do that right now because it kind of takes me a while to get the post all written out. But I just lay out all the steps I've done to recreate it. Lay out all the different steps and forums that I've tried to fix it. Then I kind of hypothesize what I think the error could be and ask if anyone has any advice, any direction they could point me. So that'll conclude today's session. Later on, probably next week, I'm going to be launching something that will help people debug things faster. It's going to be a little tool for Bonsai where you can hire consultants to help you quickly. So I'm going to be out for the night. See you guys tomorrow.